Mm. Hare Krishna, everyone. We are continuing our discussion on leaving the body, and we were just reading from the third canto, 30th chapter, text 1 through 20. We finished reading that. Now we're going to go back to my file in which I compiled quotes from Srila Prabhupada after searching the topic of at the time of death and seeing what Prabhupada had said about that. So, welcome everyone, and I just have to get my notes up. And I don't always have my notes ready before we start. So, excuse me for that. And yes, now we just have to remember where we left off. That's the next problem. Okay, so give me a moment. I'm going to find where we left off. Hare Krishna. Okay. Well, tells me where I left off. No. Only Kamaniya knows where we left off. I don't know. So Kamaniya, if you can come on HG Mahatma Das, that's where I can see the chat. We're trying this. We may tomorrow decide to go back to the old way and then broadcast to my other Facebook from the old page. We're used to that. I'm trying to remember where we left off. I think we had been reading from the 10th canto. Is that correct? 10. Of course, we can read again what we already read. If you're reading from the time of death, yeah, that's the doc. So, Kamaniya, now we finished. We're going to a new document. So, Kamaniya, you can help me remember. Is it 10.2.23? Is that where we left off? I can read what, I think it was 10.2.23. Let's start there. It's a beautiful verse. Next verse is CC 522. What page is that on? We already finished the Bhagavatam? Is that what you're saying? We did all the Bhagavatam? Okay, we did all the Bhagavatam. I was just going back looking at something. I want to read this again. Can you go back to 10.2.23? I want to read this again. It's just nice. Just as a revision, and then we'll go to 522. Is that okay? If you can bring up, go back. No, don't worry about it. Let me just read this verse. This is 10.2.23, and then we'll go to the one you put up. O Madhava, Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord of the Goddess of Fortune, if devotees completely in love with you sometimes fall from the path of devotion, they do not fall like non-devotees, for you still protect them. Thus, they fearlessly traverse the heads of their opponents and continue to progress in devotional service. So, the broadcast is being shared on the other page automatically. So, when we began this discussion, a lot of questions came up as to, but what if I'm not Krishna conscious? And it's okay. You have the verse, the CC verse. That's the next one we'll do. So you have, it's okay. So devotees, worry, but we've been making the point that if Krishna is in any way taking care of you now, then it won't stop when you die, and that devotees have nothing to fear. And this verse says here, they fearlessly traverse the heads of their opponents and continue to progress in devotional service. Yeah, so there's no enemy, there's nothing to stop us, there's nothing to fear. That's the idea. So, should we be worried about how we leave our body? Should we prepare for that, and should we follow everything we've been discussing? Yes. Then we should do it all. But at the same time, this verse is saying Krishna will be there to protect us. Yeah. So that's the main thing. You should be protected. As a devotee, be protected. Radhapriya, if it's not broadcasting on my personal page, just put a message up. But then Krishna Karshini can put it on my personal page. Radhapriya was supposed to do it. It's supposed to happen automatically. But if it's not happening, Krishna Karshini, you can do it. So that's the idea. So I think that's an important principle, right? When you're under the shelter of Krishna, there's protection in all stages of life. And as we said, and sometimes Prabhupada said, if you forget Krishna at the time of death, he'll remember you. And in Isopanishad, the devotees praying, please remember everything I've done when I die. So you don't really have to ask Krishna to remember everything you've done, because he already does. And you're his devotee, and he takes care of you, and he knows that what you've done. Now, you might look at yourself and say, but I'm contaminated, I'm fallen, I'm this and that. But as I pointed out many times before, Krishna doesn't look at you like you look at you. Like we tend to look at ourselves from the lowest perspective, and Krishna tends to look at us from the highest perspective. Like what sincerity, what little bit of sincerity I have, he blows it up. What little service I've done, he blows it up. What little bit of devotion I have, he blows it up. And we tend to look at ourselves and think, oh, I don't have any sincerity, I don't have any devotion. I've hardly done any service. So then we doubt Krishna will take care of us or protect us, or why would he want to take care of us and protect us because I'm so low? And Krishna doesn't look at it that way. So once you come under the shelter, you give yourself to Krishna, then you're under his protection. Then these things are not big worries anymore. How you leave your body, your destination, what if I don't remember Krishna, and so forth. These things they're not really concerns anymore. That's the idea of surrendering to Krishna. There's so many things you don't have to worry about. It's not that you don't make effort to be better and to be Krishna conscious, but at the same time, there's so many things you don't have to worry about because they're taken care of by him. So that's the idea of this verse. We read this already, but I was going through this paper and I just thought, let's review this because it's nice. Mm-hmm. I've had 1 million people writing me on Facebook. Are they writing me saying they can't see the broadcast? Anyway, someone's got to put it up there, either Radhapriya or Krishna Karshini, and then let people know if they want to participate in the chat. They have to be on this page. So we'll read the purport. Devotee, and yeah, so Kamaniya has put this, if you want to read along with me. Devotees generally do not fall down, but if circumstantially they do, the Lord, because of their strong attachment to him, gives them protection in all circumstances. So, in other words, if you're dependent on Krishna your whole life for everything, and you, let's say, fall or you have difficulty, Krishna will take you there. Excuse me, Krishna will take care of you. Yeah, it did cause confusion. I was a little reluctant. One devotee said, go on this page because there's more followers. But what I think we're going to do is maybe broadcast from the old page and then stream it to this page, because that way it's less confusing. But we'll let you know tomorrow. Stay tuned for more surprises. We're just experimenting now with streaming, not only to my pages, but streaming to other people's pages as well. So, the idea of a devotee is, okay, I give my life to Krishna, everything for Krishna, I take shelter there, and then if I'm not perfect, if I try my best, Krishna will make up the difference. That's what Prabhupada's saying here. So let me read that again. Devotees generally do not fall down, but if circumstantially they do, the Lord, because of their strong attachment to him, gives them protection in all circumstances. Thus, even if devotees fall down, they are still strong enough to traverse the heads of their enemy. So that means if we get weak or we slip or there's some lack on our part, Krishna can make up the lack. So now I'm talking specifically about leaving our body. Krishna can make up the lack for what we lack because we've given ourselves to him, and so we're dependent on him. And so when you're dependent on him, then he says, okay, my devotee's dependent on me, so I have to come. And if we're not dependent on him, then Krishna says, okay, I don't have to come. Like we have the story with Draupadi and calling for Krishna, but Krishna didn't originally come. And he only came at that point when she realized on her own she could not defend herself. So then Krishna came. And when Krishna was asked why he didn't come originally, basically he was saying, because she didn't really need me. She was kind of saying, Krishna help me, but she was helping herself. So I'm not saying that we don't make efforts to be Krishna conscious, but Krishna sees that where there's helplessness on your part, or helplessness on our part, and then he'll come and make up for that. And so he'll do that now, and he'll do that at the moment of death. He'll do that always. And when we feel helpless and say, Krishna, this is what I'm lacking, I need your help, that's when he comes to help. And Prabhupada had explained that to me in a letter. He said that if you create, he didn't say it this way, but this is the connotation. If you create space for Krishna to come and help you by feeling helpless and showing Krishna, here, over here, this is where I need help, or over here, this is where I need help. As a surrendered soul dependent on Krishna, then Krishna will fill in that space. But often we don't create that space. We just think, oh, I'll do it myself. So therefore, the idea is, okay, I should try my best to do everything and perfect my bhakti. But where I'm lacking, then I say, Krishna, this area I'm lacking, I need your help here. And so it may be that you feel like, well, in the latter days of my life, I feel I'll be lacking in leaving my body in Krishna consciousness, and say, Krishna's saying here, I'll make up, but at this, for whatever you lack. But at the same time, you can say, Krishna, I'm lacking, and because I'm surrendered to you, I need your help. So I'm pointing you in this direction. This is where I need your help, like Draupadi. Okay, I can't do this. I give up. So sometimes we try, and there's certain things we we just can't do, and we just say, Krishna, can you help? Because I've tried, I can't do this. So that's what's being said here. Even if devotees fall down, they are still strong enough to traverse the heads of their enemies. We have actually seen that our Krishna conscious movement has many opponents, such as the deprogrammers who instituted a strong legal case against the devotees. We thought this case would last a long time to settle, would take a long time. But because the devotees were protected by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we unexpectedly won the case in one day. We unexpectedly won the case in one day. Thus, a case that was expected to continue for years was settled in a day because of the protection of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who has promised in Bhagavad Gita 9:31, Konteya pratijanihi name bhakta pranashati. O son of Kunti, declare it boldly that my devotee never perishes. So this is the idea. We don't have to read the rest. I just wanted to review that idea. And one of the things we're trying to do in this class, in these classes, is allay this fear, or maybe allay any fear about anything you have. Of course, death is usually the biggest fear for most people. But if we can enter that in confidence of Krishna's protection as a devotee, he'll always take care of us and help us in any way we need, then we can apply that same principle throughout our life. Or you can shift it around. If in your life you depend on Krishna and you realize that he's taking care of you and that's your attitude, then you enter death that way. So that's the idea. So that in that sense, a devotee has nothing to fear because we're always under the protection of Krishna. So I just wanted to make that point. And now, if you scroll up, Kamini has put in another verse. It's a Chaitanya Charitamrita 5:22, which is actually where we left off. Excuse me, last time we were reading. So if you go up a little bit, you'll see that. And I've titled this, Materialists Have No Choice of Their Next Life. And just a message, if you're watching this on my normal Facebook page, I'm broadcasting it on my pro page. And so if you're making any comments on the normal page we broadcast, I won't see them. And if you want to make comments that I can see, you need to go to HG Mahatma Das. I know this is confusing, and maybe we'll resolve this today so we won't confuse you anymore. But anyway, it's an experiment. We were thinking, and maybe wrongly thinking, because there's more followers on the other page, more people would watch. Maybe we're right, maybe we're wrong. I don't know. So, this is Chaitanya Charitamrita. I don't know if it's Adi Leela, or what Leela it is, but it's chapter 5, verse 22. Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't put in if it's Antya or Adi or Madhyam. Anyway, it is foolish to think that every soul that passes away goes to the same place. Either the soul goes to a place he desires at the time of death, or upon leaving the body, he is forced to accept a position according to his acts in the previous life. The difference between the materialist and the yogi is that a materialist cannot determine his next body, whereas a yogi can consciously attain a suitable body for enjoyment in the higher planets. That's interesting, right? A materialist is under the jurisdiction of all the karma he's created, but the yogi has, you could say the yogi is now freed, liberated from karma, and then he can decide where he'll go. Throughout his life, the gross materialist, who is constantly after sense gratification, spends all day earning his livelihood to maintain his family. And at night he wastes his energy in sex enjoyment, or else goes to sleep thinking about all he has done in the daytime. That is the monotonous life of the materialist. Although differently graded as businessmen, lawyers, politicians, professors, judges, coolies, pickpockets, laborers, and so on, materialists all simply engage in eating, sleeping, fearing, and sense gratification, and thus spoil their valuable lives pursuing luxury and neglecting to perfect their lives through spiritualization. This is really funny. I don't know if you picked up on this. And Prabhupada saying the life of a materialist, it's the same whether you are a professor or a politician or a judge or a coolie. I don't know if everybody knows what a coolie is. A coolie is a person who carries luggage at the train station. And then Prabhupada says pickpocket. So whether you're a politician, a professor, a judge, a coolie, a pickpocket, a thief, in other words, a laborer, whatever position you have, basically your life's the same because you're just engaged in eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. And your destination, even though you were the judge, your destination, if your activities are the same as everyone else, your destination will be the same as everyone else. So, yeah, I thought that was interesting. And then Prabhupada says another thing, which is, this is also interesting. It's very simple. What he's saying is very simple, but he says all of them are pursuing luxury. And even the coolie is pursuing luxury. He may not have facility, but he's trying to get as much money as he has, as he possibly can get, and upgrade his standard of living. So Prabhupada's saying, it doesn't matter who you are, what your position is, basically your life is the pursuance of luxury. And in that pursuance, you commit sinful activity, and then because of those sinful activities, then your next destination, you'll go down, and it doesn't matter if you pursued luxury as a judge, a professor, a doctor, a lawyer, a thief, a coolie, an ordinary worker, your destination is the same. So that's interesting. Because, at least from the material perspective, we would think, oh, I'm a professor, so I'm highly elevated. And Prabhupada would say, okay, you're highly elevated now, but what about the next life? Your position will not be different than even a thief or an ordinary laborer. Okay, so Kamini, let's go to the next one, which is, the next one is Chaitanya Charitamrita 7.1. I don't have the Bengali here. This is entitled, Your material possessions cannot save you. Let me first offer my respectful obeisances unto Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is the ultimate goal of life for one bereft of all possessions in this material world, and is the only meaning for one advancing in spiritual life. Thus, let me write about his magnanimous contribution of devotional service in love of God. Kamaniya, that's in the that's the next one after 522 on my paper. I'm reading it from Word, not the PDF, but I think it's the same. Anyway, Kamini will bring that up, and I'll begin reading the purport. A person in the conditioned stage of material existence is in an atmosphere of helplessness. But the conditioned soul, under the illusion of Maya, or the external energy, thinks that he is completely protected by his country, society, friendship, and love, not knowing that at the time of death, none of these can save him. The laws of material, like now we're seeing in the world situation with the coronavirus, how we don't have solutions and cures for so many problems, and if you're dying of a disease, sometimes nobody can save you. And we've invested so much energy in material things saving us when ultimately they can't. That's what Prabhupada is saying. The laws of material nature are so strong that none of our material possessions can save us from the cruel hands of death. In the Bhagavad Gita 13.9, it is stated, Janma mrityu jara vyadi dukkha doshanudarshanam. Kamaniya, what happened? Did you put this one up somewhere? No, we lost you. Chaitanya Charitamrita 7.1. You don't have that on your sheet? One who is actually advancing must always consider the four principles of miserable life, namely birth, death, old age, and disease. One cannot be saved from all these miseries unless he takes shelter of the lotus feet of Lord Sri Chaitanya, of the Lord. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is therefore the only shelter for all conditioned souls. An intelligent person, therefore, does not put his faith in any material possessions, but completely takes shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. So this is like a constant theme of Prabhupada's, that nothing can save you, nothing can give you shelter, only Krishna. And why would Prabhupada have to say that unless we're very conditioned to think that other things can save us, or there are other shelters? And if you actually think about material life and even look at your own life, you'll see that we do take shelter in many things. We take shelter in various forms of sense gratification as kind of a way to pacify ourselves, or even we take shelter in material things to protect ourselves. And not that we shouldn't try to protect ourselves, but in our effort to protect ourselves, Prabhupada would always remind us, it's not this thing, this flu shot, or this medicine, or this doctor, or this operation, or this protective gear, or any of this that's ultimately protecting you. It's Krishna that's ultimately protecting you. He'd always remind us. Sometimes the devotees, they didn't know in the early days of the movement, when they became sick, how to deal with it. Should we just chant? Should we just pray? Should we take medicine? Should we go to a doctor? And so they asked Prabhupada, what should we do? And Prabhupada said, you go to the doctor, but you pray to Krishna to heal you, and ultimately it's Krishna, not the doctor, who will heal you, or the sanction of Krishna. And Prabhupada says in regards to a verse by Prahlad Maharaj, where Prahlad Maharaj says that nobody can protect us. And Prabhupada said, you could make every arrangement possible to be protected, but that still there's no guarantee that you'll be protected unless Krishna sanctions it. So that's the idea. So, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is therefore the only shelter for all conditioned souls. An intelligent person, therefore, does not put his faith in any material possessions, but completely takes shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. Such a person is called a kinchana, or one who does not possess anything in this material world. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is also known as a kinchana gochara, for he can be achieved by a person who does not put faith in material possessions. Therefore, for the fully surrendered soul who has no material possessions on which to depend, Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the only shelter. So, this is, you could say this is the definition of devotional service, that he doesn't depend on anything material. That's the idea. So again, Prabhupada's trying to convince us that don't depend on anything material. You you use your intelligence, you make an effort and so forth, but ultimately you know that it's Krishna you have to depend on. And sometimes you have nothing material to even depend on to try to help the situation, and then you just have to, Krishna, I'm yours, help me. That's the idea. And so if we practice that now, then in the last days of life, we'll be practiced to depend on Krishna. So it's not going to be such a traumatic experience. But if we're not practiced to depend on Krishna, then when we come to that last moment, it could be extremely difficult. So therefore, as I was saying last week, a very, very important point, that there's so many situations in our life that set us up perfectly to practice for the ultimate test of leaving the body. So many difficulties. So if I'm in a difficulty and I learn how to completely depend on Krishna, there's some situation that I find very difficult to go through. And there's so many situations that could be like that. And I can go through it in this consciousness. Then what I'm doing is I'm developing this mentality. You could say I'm developing the skills, although that's not really the best way to say it. You could say I'm developing the transcendental skills of dependence on Krishna in difficulty. And therefore, because I develop these transcendental skills, naturally when I'm in difficulty, I will tend to say, Krishna, help me. That will be my natural tendency because that's what I'm practicing. And as I'm going through difficulties in life, learning to depend on Krishna, then when the ultimate difficulty is there, when I have to leave my body, I will naturally be able to do that. And then if we can do that, then when we come to that final test, we'll remember, yes, I was practiced to approach difficulties in this way. Not trying to control, but giving up control and depending on Krishna. And now because I've practiced, then at this moment, leaving my body, I have faith it will not be difficult because I'm practiced to depend on Krishna. And I've done it all my life. But if we're practiced to take control and not depend on Krishna, then leaving our body is actually the worst time to try to take control because that's the time where we lose all control. Isn't it? So, yeah, that's the problem. Well, you could say that's the solution. So, it looks like we have a problem here because I don't see any more people texting or writing anything. And it looks like I'm not getting the text. Is that true? Well, somebody write some text. Just say, Hare Krishna. As I want to see if I can see it. Because the last thing I see is Parker. And I don't see. And so normally Kamania puts up the verse and I don't see that. So I'm starting to think something went wrong here. You know what they say? If it's not broken, don't fix it. Maybe we're trying to fix too many things here. It's creating a problem. I don't know. So that was a nice verse. And I think these points can be well taken. And it's just a reminder that we've been discussing, excuse me, how the difficulties that we sometimes face in this life are just, they're like practice fights. Like a boxer, he'll practice fighting before he goes into the big bout. So all these things are practice fights so that when you go into the big bout, you have all this practice. And so, yeah, when I was going through this difficulty, I remember thinking like this. I remember depending on Krishna. Oh, yeah, okay. It is working. So I remember thinking of Krishna in this way, surrendering in this way, depending on him in this way. And then so in these really difficult times at the end of life, I have developed that mentality. It'll be natural. So I think that's super important. Don't you think that's super important? And if we remember this, that whenever you're going through difficulty, instead of running away from it, instead of resisting it, then you'll think, oh, this is practice. I shouldn't run away from this because the difficulties at the end of life could be much greater than this. and I need to practice. I need to practice fighting this little guy. So when I fight the big guy, I've got the conditioning and the habits, right? So don't run away from difficulty. Difficulties make us stronger, and with each difficulty we overcome, we become stronger, and therefore we can face the next difficulty with greater strength, right? And so that's how Krishna prepares us in life for more and more, how Krishna prepares us in life for more and more difficulties. And the whole idea of undergoing difficulties is to remain stable, is to not become overcome by depression, or overcome by anger, or overcome by resentment, or overcome by the need to control, or overcome by hysteria when you can't control. The idea is to practice stability beyond duality, the middle path. Okay, this is difficult, but let me remain stable and go through this calmly, peacefully, without agitation, without anger, without frustration, and so forth. And as I learn to do that, then I'll be able to deal with greater and greater difficulties. But even if some little difficulty comes up and I just, as we say in America, I lose it. What does it mean I lose it? I could totally lose my mind. I become angry, offensive, whatever it is. That's not good, because then we've failed a test. And if we fail the test, Krishna has to send the test again. Okay, here's another test. You failed that one. Got to take it again. He'll put you in another situation and say, okay, you're going to lose your mind in this situation. So that way, difficulties are good. Not only they're good, they're necessary. They're practice. It's practice bouts for us for the big bout, right? I think also in maybe in baseball, you have a team and they're practicing, and sometimes, or in football, the team will practice with one another. So they'll say, okay, you half on one side, you half on the other. It's the same team, but they're practicing against one another. They have to do that. So that's, life is like that. Okay. So we finished reading that. Now we're going to go Chaitanya Charitamrita 19:159, your popularity misspelled. Your popularity cannot save you. Now I wonder if Kamaniya, are you there? Or maybe Kamaniya's lost her internet connection. I don't know. Or maybe somebody else. I can't tell. The problem is I can't tell you if it's what section of Chaitanya Charitamrita it is, because I didn't write it down. Anyway, so you'll have to pay more attention. This is from a purport to one of the Leelas, Adi Ancha, or I would guess, actually I can't guess, I don't know. But it's chapter 19, text 159 of one of those three Leelas. There are many religious propagandists who do not know how the ultimate problems of life can be solved. And they also try to educate people in a form of sense gratification. This is also jiva hingshana. Jiva hingshana means violence to the jivas, to the souls of this world, being violent. I'll go back and explain everything. Let's just read through it. Real knowledge is not given, and religionists mislead the general populace. As far as material profits are concerned, one should know that whatever material profit one has must be abandoned at the time of death. Unfortunately, people do not know that there is life after death. Therefore, mundane people waste their time amassing material profit, which has to be left behind at the time of death. Such profit has no eternal benefit. Similarly, adoration by mundane people is valueless, because after death, one has to accept another body. Let's say, we don't know, but let's say in your last life you were extremely famous, as a whatever, a writer, an artist, actor, musician, politician, scientist. Maybe you discovered a vaccine. Maybe you discovered the vaccine for the flu or polio. Who knows? And here you are. And that adoration that you got in your last life has no bearing on this life. And also, even from the material point of view, it has no bearing because you can't even remember it. So you can't even get any satisfaction. Or if you could remember it and now you're not as famous, it would probably make you miserable to know that. So let's read that again. Similarly, adoration by mundane people is valueless because after death, one has to accept another body. So your adoration, the other point is your adoration does not prevent you from taking birth again. So you could be famous, but number one, you're going to die. And number two, your fame has no insulating value for the bad karma you've created. So you could devote your life to becoming famous, but that fame will have no benefit for you in terms of your spiritual journey. That's the point. And Prabhupada's making that point is because everybody wants to be praised and honored. Material adoration and titles are decorations that cannot be carried over to the next body. In the next life, everything is forgotten. Okay, so I want to go back to a few points Prabhupada is making. He begins by talking about religious propagandists. That means preachers of religion, teachers of religion. And then he says there are many such people who don't know how to help their followers transcend birth and death. And actually what they're doing, Prabhupada says, they're just helping them, in the name of religion, get more sense gratification. And so then the goal, generally in this age, people engage in sinful activities to fulfill their senses because, as we said yesterday, because they're not following the Vedas, so then they have to engage, like we were talking about how Prabhupada said, enjoy sense gratification as much as you need. And then he said, but not sinful sense gratification. So many religious, so-called religious people are engaging their followers in sinful sense gratification in the name of that this is what God wants or this is pleasing. And so what's important about this, and Prabhupada has made this point, and this is a very important point for explaining Krishna consciousness to others, it's not just a philosophy or it's not just a religion, but this is scientific, as scientific as you could say the laws of gravity. In other words, there's scientific principles which determine what happens after a person dies according to their actions here. And so if you act this way, this is the result. If you act in goodness, you go up. If you act in ignorance, you go down. Just like if you jump out of a tree, you go down, because that's a law of nature. So I haven't seen in Christianity that anything religious is explained scientifically. It all evolves around more or less their own ideas and their own beliefs that God loves you and he wants you to enjoy materially, so be happy enjoying materially. Then he'll forgive you for your sins and you'll go to heaven. So there's no like real scientific information in that of consequences for actions. Whereas we say, no, if you die in goodness, you go up. If you die in passion, you stay here. If you die in ignorance, you go down. And so even though you have some religious faith, but you also have to look at your actions, because your actions are cause and effect, so they're going to determine consequences. So you have religious faith, but then you've engaged in sinful activity, and there's a consequence for this sin. So the religious faith does not counteract the sins which you're consciously making. Now, the problem is, this is why this age is so unfortunate, is that people don't know those are sins. So they're religious, they believe in God, and they're engaging in sins, and the religious leaders are telling them those are not sins, that actually God wants you to do this and God wants you to enjoy. And then we say, but according to Bhagavad Gita, there are specific reactions to your activity. to your activities, even though you believe in God and you go to church, but there are reactions to these activities. So that these religious leaders are doing the greatest disservice by engaging people in the name of God loves you, do this, enjoy your senses. They're engaging them in sinful activity. So as we discussed yesterday, you can engage people, quote unquote, in sense gratification. You can even encourage that, as long as you don't encourage sense gratification that's sinful. Okay, you want to eat? Just don't eat meat and offer your food. You want to enjoy sex? Okay, do it in marriage to have children. You want to make a lot of money and enjoy life? Okay, make your home a temple. Invite people over. Use it in Krishna's service. As one devotee had a Mercedes Benz, and he said, I bought this car to pick up the Maharajas from the airport. Okay, so I don't know if that's true or not, if that was a rationale, but let's say it was true. Okay, he had the money, and he just uses the car to transport senior devotees. Okay. So that's the idea. So religious propagandists do not know how the ultimate problems of life can be solved, because everything's based on faith, and they don't understand karmic consequences. So they can't help people. They're misleading people based solely on faith. If you have faith, then there's no reaction to what you're doing. And so we could say, well, that's true to some degree. And the Christians say, and I believe the Bible says this, every man has sinned and fallen short of the glory of the Lord. So we say that also. Yeah, when you walk, you're killing animals. When you're killing insects, you breathe, you're killing germs. When you're cooking, you're killing so many microscopic entities. So yeah, everyone is sinful. And then Prabhupada would say, but these four sins, these four you cannot commit. And specifically, he would focus on meat eating. So he in one sense, accepted the idea, yes, you'll be free from sin, but these four do not commit, and do not commit sin willingly, thinking, I'm weak and I'll be forgiven. And so that's what they're teaching, and that's why it's so unfortunate. You know, this verse in Bhagavatam, in Kali Yuga, people are unfortunate. It's Manda Bhagya. Bhagya means fortune. Mahabhagya, oh, greatly fortunate. And this is Manda Bhagya. Manda means like less fortunate, no fortune, minus fortune, negative fortune. So now you have these people who have some religious faith, and then the preachers are telling them you can engage in sense gratification. And God will send you back to Godhead. So now they think they're going back to Godhead, but scientifically speaking, they're not. And so how unfortunate is that? These are the kind of things that inspire us to preach. And so then Prabhupada in the next sentence says, this is jiva himshana. This is envy of the living entity, because instead of helping them, you're destroying them. And you may not realize it, you may not know it, because you've been wrongly educated, but still it comes out as jiva himsa. Real knowledge is not given, and religionists mislead the general populace. Hare Krishna. So, there's this gospel, it's called Prosperity Gospel, where they say, God is merciful, he gives me things. And here Prabhupada says, as far as material profits are concerned, one should know that whatever material profit one has must be abandoned at the time of death. So this is also undermining spiritual values, because it's like the proof that God loves you is that you have a lot. And it's kind of like, you might say, well, in our movement, it's not so much like that, maybe a little bit. But in our movement, the proof could be, well, God loves you, you have a big position. Now you're a temple this, or a commander that, or ABC, GBC, this, that. That's not necessarily proof. It could be. but not necessarily. So in Prabhupada said, he one time was joking, GBC, ABC, he said, we're all, none of these things in and of themselves are of any value in saving you. Your Krishna consciousness will save you. But of course, these are important services if you do them, but you understand the point. Okay? In and of themselves, it's not going to save you, just a position. Okay, so now we're going to Nectar of Devotion. We finished Chaitanya Charitamrita. We're going to Nectar of Devotion. So we're going through the various books. There's more to say on this topic in each of these books, but as I said, I was just searching at the time of death. Those 5 words, I was searching, and then going through all of Prabhupada's books. So if I were searching leaving the body, dying, death, more things would come. And the document's already 28 pages just on that, and I don't think I finished searching. So it'd be quite a big document. Anyway, I'm going to search more and find things that we haven't read yet. So this is Nectar Devotion, chapter 10. In the Padma Purana, the same remembrance is explained as follows. Quote, "Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto the Supreme Lord Krishna, because if someone remembers him either at the time of death or during his span of life, he becomes freed from all sinful reactions." Isopanishad, my Lord, let me remember you at the time of death. Please remember me, and let me remember you. There's a song like that, right? I'll remember you, you remember me. Right? Yes? Something like that. So that song is good. Please let me remember you, and please remember me. That's the prayer of the devotee. And what happens when you remember Krishna? Apavitra pavitra va. You know that verse, whether you're pure, impure, sarvavashtam katopi va, whether you've done everything or nothing. Yat smare pundarikaksham, if you remember the lotus-eyed one, then you'll become suchi. Baya antar suchi. You'll be purified inside and outside. So, somehow or other, ladies and gentlemen, the goal is to remember Krishna, especially when we're leaving our body. So practice now. So when that happens, you'll be good at it. Okay, the next point follows this. This is from Nectar of Instruction, text 8. Train the mind to think of Krishna. So if somebody wants to put this up, we lost Kamaniya. Maybe she lost her internet connection. Or her phone died and she can't find the charger. Or something happened and she had to go. If someone wants to put this up, then we can read it. It's Nectar of Instruction, text 8. And this is called Train the Mind to Think of Krishna. And here's the verse. The essence of all advice is that one should utilize one's full time, 24 hours a day, in nicely chanting and remembering the Lord's divine name, transcendental form, qualities, and eternal pastimes, thereby gradually engaging one's tongue and mind. Okay, so 24 hours a day, remembering Krishna, hearing, chanting. Okay. Krishna's form, qualities, and pastimes. In this way, one should reside in Braja, Goloka Vrindavan Dham, and serve Krishna under the guidance of devotees. One should follow in the footsteps of the Lord's beloved devotees who are deeply attached to his devotional service. Purport. Since the mind may be one's enemy or one's friend, one has to train the mind to become his friend. So you remember, we were talking about training the mind. So the practice of Krishna consciousness or the process of Krishna consciousness, part of it is mind training. I'm in the mind training program. I'm training my mind. What am I training my mind to do? think of Krishna's pastimes, qualities, form, instructions. The Krishna consciousness movement is especially meant for training the mind. That's such a nice statement, isn't it? We can remember that. Prabhu, what are you doing this week? I'm in the mind training program. I have a course on training the mind. What are you training the mind for? Training the mind to be Krishna conscious 24 hours a day. The Krishna consciousness movement is especially meant for training the mind to be always engaged in Krishna's business. The mind contains hundreds and thousands of impressions, not only of this life, but also many, many lives of the past. That's a problem. That's why a lot of us, we have thoughts and desires and we don't understand why we have them. We don't even want them. They're just in there and we're questioning, why am I thinking like this? I wouldn't do this. I wouldn't want this. This is against Krishna consciousness. Oh, that's from another life, most likely. So we're not just dealing with conditioning of this life, many lives. These impressions sometimes come in contact with one another and produce contradictory pictures. The Prabhupada's talking about dreaming sometimes. You get strange dreams from different ideas come up that are contradictory. In this way, the mind's function can become dangerous for a conditioned soul. Or also what Prabhupada means is contradictory pictures. I have one thought, which is to go right, and then I have another thought, which is to go left. I think that's actually what he means here, not dreaming. So let me read that again, now that I'm more clear. The mind contains hundreds and thousands of impressions, not only of this life, but also of many, many lives of the past. These impressions sometimes come in contact with one another and produce contradictory pictures. So then you're wondering, why is it that if I want to do this, my mind is telling me to do that? Because we have contradictory impressions because of past conditioning. The past conditioning could even be this life. And so in the past, I had certain desires. Now I've become a devotee, I don't have those desires, but the impressions are there, so it creates contradiction. Now I'm desiring to do something in Krishna consciousness. Sometimes the other desire comes because it's been conditioned, programmed. So therefore, and this is the context Prabhupada's using this, he's saying, therefore we have to train the mind. Krishna consciousness is mind training because the mind was trained in the wrong way. So you're retraining it. Like, you ever learn something the wrong way and then you have to retrain yourself to do it the right way? Like you're typing like this, but then you have to learn to type like this. Or you play an instrument the wrong way, or you did something wrong, roll chapatis the wrong way, and you have to relearn it. And so there's always the tendency to do it the way you've always done it. That's habit. So the mind has habituated. Think of the mind like any other habit. The mind is habituated to think of sense gratification. That's where it naturally goes because that's what we've trained it to do for millions of lifetimes. And now we're training it differently. So naturally there's going to be contradiction in this stage until we become more attached to Krishna. These impressions sometimes come in contact with one another and produce contradictory pictures. In this way, the mind's function can become dangerous for a conditioned soul. Students of psychology are aware of the mind's various psychological changes. In Bhagavad Gita, it is said, Yam yam vapi smaram bhavam tajante kalevaram tam tam evaite kantaya sada tad bhava bhavitaha. Whatever state of being one remembers, when he quits his body, that state he will attain without fail. Now, we've read this verse before. We read it actually last week or 10 days ago. We spent a lot of time on this verse. But I think as we read, we get a broader context, and then the same verses kind of stick out and have different meanings to us. So, if it's true that whatever you think of at the time of death, that's what you become, then wouldn't it make sense that now we need to train the mind to think of what we want to think of at the time of death? And every time we think of something other than what we would like to think at the time of death, that's a sign, hey, hey, self, hello, self, don't think of this. Train your mind to think of Krishna. This is not what you want to be thinking of. We don't normally think like that. We just think thoughts that give us happiness. Now, here's a problem. And I've talked about this a little bit, but maybe not extensively, and I think we should spend a little time on this. There is gross enjoyment, the word gross, this is funny. Okay, I have to explain this, especially if English is your first language. The way we use gross in America is when we say something's really bad, we say that's gross. It's like very bad, very, very, very bad. Well, that's gross. Or something may smell bad, and you'll say, ooh, that's gross, it smells bad. Or something looks really bad, and you say, that's gross. It's like alarming, sickening. Yeah, I think the word sickening. If something's kind of sickening, you'll say, oh, that's gross. Like you see a dead animal on the street, you'd say, oh, that's gross. But Prabhupada uses the word gross with a different definition. He uses the word gross when he juxtaposes it or compares it with the word subtle. So gross means the opposite of subtle. Gross means what you can see. Subtle means what you can't see. So when Prabhupada uses the word gross, it means gross senses, like with your gross senses. You don't have to use the word gross, so to speak, except that the mind's a sense and it's not gross, it's subtle. So that way gross sense is obvious. With my eyes, I'm seeing with my gross senses. These are things, gross meaning which I can see. Mind, intelligence, ego, I can't see. It's subtle. Whatever you can't see materially with your eyes, whatever you can't hear, touch, taste, smell, that would be considered subtle. So the mind is subtle. So I can engage in activities with my body and senses. That would be gross activity, not abominable gross, just what we can see gross, not sickening gross. Although if we can use the word gross as sickening, but in this sense we're just using it as that I can see it, it's visible, it's external. And I can also engage in activities subtly in my mind without doing them. I can think about them, right? Have you ever thought about doing something? And have you ever, of course you have you ever enjoyed thinking about doing something in your mind? Either what would it be like if I did this, or just imagining in your mind that you're doing it? So, and you'll say, well, in Shastra it says that if you think about it, there's no sinful reaction. There's only sinful reaction if you do it. That's true, but there's a problem. And what's the problem? Well, excuse me. What's the problem? We're talking here about training the mind. So the problem is, if you're training the mind, it's not just enough not to do something. You have to stop thinking about doing it. And so a lot of what happens when you first stop doing it, you stop doing it grossly with your body, but you don't always stop doing it with your mind. So say, well, I can no longer do it with my body, so I'll just do it with my mind. I'll do it in my mind. I'll imagine it in my mind. So if the process of Krishna consciousness is to train the mind, that every time the mind goes away from Krishna consciousness, then we have to think, I'm supposed to train the mind, and now I'm letting my mind go. This is not good. This is not a good idea. I'm engaging. I can engage. Okay, this is the point I want to make. I don't think I've woken up this morning. You could break all four regulative principles without breaking them. So how do you do that? You don't break them with the gross body. You break them in your mind. You think about those activities. So you engage in those activities in your mind. You just don't engage them with your body. And then again, you'll say, well, I didn't break the four regulative principles because I didn't do them with my body. And I would say, that's true. And Shastra says in Kali Yuga, you will not get a sinful reaction. But you could say, but really you did break those four principles because you did them in your mind, and the effects of doing something in your mind contaminate you. So fortunately, there's no sinful reaction for doing it. I ate a Big Mac in my mind, so there's no karma for killing a cow. But there's a reaction in the mind, almost as a contamination, almost as if you actually did it in reality. That's the problem. So when we give up the sin, we don't always give up the proclivity to commit the sin, and therefore oftentimes we give it up externally with the gross body, but we continue doing it in the subtle body. And then that subtle body is being conditioned to that sense gratification. Does that make sense? Now, here's the next problem, and I think you could see this coming. If I'm doing something in my mind, but I'm not doing it physically, then I can say, okay, I'm following Krishna consciousness because I'm not doing this physically. However, if I'm thinking about it, don't you think it's likely that eventually you're going to do it if you think about it too much? And of course the answer is, Dayato Vishayam Pumsam. If you meditate on something, Sangha, you become attached. Sangha Sanjayate Kama, and then the lust overtakes you. So in training ourselves in this phrase here where Prabhupada's saying training the mind, if Krishna consciousness is training the mind, then we have to think not only in terms of I'm giving up the activity, the sinful activity, but I have to give it up in my mind also, and that's much more difficult. And the other interesting thing about this, as we all know, is nobody can see what you're doing in your mind. So externally, you're a Pukka devotee, but nobody can know internally what's going on in your mind. And you may not be a Pukka devotee. Pukka means perfect. You may not be a Pukka devotee in your mind. So that once you master the body, where you're not engaging the body in sinful activity, you still need to master the mind. Don't think, okay, just because I'm not doing it with my body, everything's okay. I have to master my mind because my mind may be still doing it, and I'm supposed to be training my mind to think of Krishna. So that's something. I don't think we have to talk much more about that. I think you understand that. But that's something to think about, because if the whole process is training the mind, then every time the mind is thinking about something that's not Krishna conscious, you have to catch it and say, okay, here's a problem, because I'm supposed to be training my mind, and I'm allowing my mind to think of things that are not Krishna conscious. So I'm not training my mind. I'm not preparing for this ultimate fight. I heard this story yesterday. It was such a good story. I don't know how it came up on my phone, but it was so instructive on two fronts instructive. There's a professional boxer. He doesn't box now. His name is Mike Tyson, and he never lost a fight. And he's supposed to have a big fight, but they postponed the fight. And he's like, well, what am I going to do while I'm waiting? And they said, well, you could fight this other guy. And the other guy the odds were against the other guy. Like, no one thought this other guy could win. And so Mike Tyson at that time is messing up his life, and drugs and alcohol and women and like that. And he just got divorced, I think. And he was in a bad state. And he didn't really train well enough for the fight. And he didn't think this guy was not really worth training for. And then he didn't have his managers. He got new managers. And so he went in and ultimately he lost the fight. And he got knocked out for the first time in his fighting career. So when you don't train, that's what happens. And Prabhupada's saying, train the mind. So you don't want to enter the final fight and you're not trained because you've allowed your mind to wander off. And although you say, well, I always followed Krishna consciousness. But if you allowed your mind to wander off, that's dangerous. You engaged in sense gratification in your mind. That's not really Krishna conscious. I would say, don't take advantage of this idea. Well, if you commit a sin in your mind, there's no sinful reaction. Because there's definitely reaction in training the mind. Definitely reaction. And if you ever do a visualization, and they say visualize, if they're good at it, they'll say visualize there's a slice of lemon, and you're smelling the lemon, and you're seeing the lemon, it's very yellow. And you can smell this fragrance, it's very fragrant. So visualize you're cutting a piece, you can feel the knife, you can see the kitchen, you feel the cutting board. So they put you right into that reality. And they say, now, take that slice of lemon, put it in your mouth, and bite it. And if you were watching people do this, this is what you would see. I will demonstrate, because I've seen this before. I will demonstrate what you would see. They'll all be sitting there, and they'll go like this. They can actually taste it in their mind. So doing something in the mind has physical effect on the body. It's almost identical to doing it. It's just that if you do it in your mind, there's no sinful reaction. But basically, you're doing it. So how are you going to train your mind if you're engaging your mind in sinful activity? Does that make sense? Isn't that interesting? And so I think this may be something which devotees haven't thought about enough, because there's always this, but if you do it in Kali Yuga, there's no sinful reaction. Okay, great, no sinful reaction, but it's destroying your mind, and it's reconditioning you towards sense gratification in your mind and away from Krishna. So I think that's super important. And the other lesson, which is nothing about what we're talking about, but it's a really good lesson. So the first lesson, he wasn't prepared. He didn't think the person he was fighting was a worthy opponent, and his life was not going well, and he was just not being disciplined. And the second thing is the team, his whole team, I don't know what they call it in boxing, but the manager like that, it changed. And the managers weren't good, and the previous managers were really good. So as he would go through the fight, they would tell him how to fight. So he's hitting you this way, you got to block it this way, and you got to do this, and stop going this way, go that way. These guys didn't tell him anything. They were a bunch of doofuses. And so he wasn't getting the guidance. And I thought, well, that's really interesting, how we need guidance to fight with Maya. We need good instruction how Maya is fighting with us. And if we don't have good mentors, then we're not going to be able to fight as well as if we have good mentors. So everybody needs good mentors. Right? You agree? Okay. So, Hare Krishna. So just a message to all of you. If you were writing on my other page, the normal page, I don't see it because I'm broadcasting on my professional page, HG Mahatma Das. So if there's a question you asked and I haven't seen it, the reason is because it's not coming to this page. And we're going to have a big meeting today with Mahatma Enterprises Board of Directors to decide which page we're going to broadcast, whether we're going to broadcast here and send it to my personal page or broadcast on my personal page and send it here. So that's the big decision we're going to have to make today. And you can tell me what you think is better. But the idea is there's more people following this page, but then more people are used to the other page. Anyway, okay. So, continue reading. At the time of death, the mind and intelligence of a living entity create the subtle form of a certain type of body for the next life. That's interesting. Prabhupada's saying pretty much your consciousness of this life is creating, through its desires, is creating a kind of body which could fulfill those desires. So we always say that you're creating your body, but I don't think we understand it exactly. Prabhupada said something amazing. I find it amazing. He said, the reason that there's so many species of life is because each species is fulfilling a specific desire. And so in this life, we're developing desires. And those desires are formulating the kind of body. It may not be a human body because your desires may not be human. So even though we don't realize it, we're actually formulating in our mind a body. We may not see it per se, but we're formulating a body which can fulfill certain desires. Just like so many times Prabhupada said, you want to sleep? You can take a bear body. You want to have sex all day? You can take a pigeon body. You want to stand naked? You can take a tree body. So when we hear these things, we shouldn't take it lightly. What Prabhupada's saying is those species, those forms are there to fulfill specific desires. So it's Prabhupada saying all those species are just responses to the various desires of a living entity. You look at a thorn bush, sometimes, a devotee's like super extroverted, introverted, doesn't want anybody around them, and don't bother me. And I joke with him, I say, Prabhu, Mataji, you'll probably take birth as a thorn bush in your next life if you're like that. You don't want anyone don't get in my space, don't get near me, and then anyone gets near you, you yell at them, like, wow, you're like a thorn bush. But Prabhupada said that, this world is created for us, so the bodies are created to fulfill those desires. So here Prabhupada's saying, so when you die, at that point, you've already formulated through your desires a body, and you don't realize it, but you've actually created it, and so then you get it in your next life. I wanted this, I wanted that, I wanted to achieve this and that. And sometimes you'll find, if someone has good karma, and then they're very young, you'll find that they're very talented, able, because that's what they wanted. Hare Krishna. So the vote is in. We have 2 votes for the personal page. Anyway, 2 votes for the personal page. No votes for the professional page so far. The voting's going. Okay, so let's continue reading this. This was such an amazing statement. At the time of death, the mind and intelligence of a living entity create the subtle form of a certain type of body for the next life. So it's like consciously, unconsciously, in your mind, you're creating a body for your next life. Welcome, Ganapati. You found me. You thought you lost me, but you found me. If the mind suddenly thinks of something not very congenial, one has to take a corresponding birth in the next life. Hare Krishna. That's scary. So when you die, don't be thinking, I don't want to be a fish. I don't want to be a dog. I don't want to be... Don't think like that, because you could become one. On the other hand, if one can think of Krishna at the time of death, he can be transferred to the spiritual world. Goloka Vrindavan. This process of transmigration is very subtle. Therefore, Srila Rupa Goswami advises devotees to train their minds in order that they will be able to remember, that they will be unable to remember anything other than Krishna. Wow. Read that again. The process of transmigration is very subtle. Therefore, Srila Rupa Goswami advises devotees to train their minds in order that they will be unable to remember anything other than Krishna. So if, what Prabhupada's trying to teach us is like everything reminds you of Krishna. Anything you see, anything that's happening, okay, now in the world there's a coronavirus, so immediately we start thinking, okay, sinful reactions, karma, this, that, whatever, somehow or other relating it to Krishna consciousness, death. Now we're talking about this whole course on death has actually come out because of this virus. It's just on everyone's mind. We all know someone remotely or personally who's affected by the virus or who's died. I just talked to someone yesterday. We worked on a music project together, and we just finished the CD, and I'll give you the link sooner or later, maybe in a week. And he just said his brother-in-law had to have a checkup. He had a surgery, and he had to have a checkup. I guess the surgery was a while ago. And when he went to the hospital for the checkup, he got coronavirus, and he's been on a respirator for 3 weeks. So everywhere you go, you'll directly, I don't know the person, but you just hear about it. And somebody, a devotee's mother, same thing. She had an operation, went in the hospital, got the coronavirus. She's now leaving her body, this, that, yeah. So everywhere you go, it's there. And so then the devotees, it's on their mind, but they see it in relation to Krishna. So that is the idea, that somehow or other, whatever going on, whatever you see, you connect it to Krishna in some way philosophically, and that way you remember Krishna all the time. That's what we're supposed to be doing. That's what it means to be a devotee. Always connect it. And if we disconnect, that's what it means to be a non-devotee. Non-devotees disconnect everything. Devotees connect everything. So if we can learn to connect everything, then you'll always be thinking of Krishna. And you might think, I never think of Krishna, but it's not true. You can think of Krishna philosophically. Or it's just, wow, now there's less industry, there's less cars on the road, the sky is more beautiful. And you just, oh, Krishna is such a beautiful artist. Just in some way connected to Krishna. That's the idea. Train their minds in order that they will be unable to remember anything other than Krishna. Similarly, the tongue should be trained to speak only of Krishna and to taste only Krishna prasad. Srila Rupa Goswami further advises, Tishnam Braje, one should live in Vrindavan, or any part of Brajabhumi. Brajabhumi, or the land of Vrindavan, is supposed to be 84 kroshas in area. 1 krosha equals 2 miles. Wow, big place. When one makes Vrindavan his residence, he should take shelter of an advanced devotee there. In this way, one should always think of Krishna and his pastimes, and live in Vrindavan also means in your mind live in Vrindavan. And keep Vrindavan in your heart, or keep Mayapur in your heart. And this is what it means to be a devotee. And so, if you're interested in things of this world, which we all happen to be interested in, but we as devotees, our interest, we always connect it to Krishna consciousness. It always comes back to that. So, that's the idea of training them. How can I train my mind that whatever happens, I see Krishna? And you might say, Prabhu, but I see a beautiful woman and I forget Krishna. So how could you expect me, when I see a beautiful woman, to relate that to Krishna? Well, if she's beautiful, then you can think, if she's beautiful and she's just one of Krishna's parts, how beautiful must Krishna be? That's one way you can think. Whenever you see beauty, you think, wow, just imagine how beautiful Krishna is. Or you hear a song and I go, I really like that song, but it's not Krishna conscious. Imagine the songs Krishna plays on his flute, how beautiful they are. Or another thing is, oh, this woman's so beautiful. How can I think of Krishna when I see her? You think, it would be so nice if this woman becomes a devotee because she's so beautiful. She can attract people because of her beauty to Krishna. And we saw that when the women would go out on book distribution. They would generally do better than the men. It was easier for them because men like to speak to them, and their beauty charmed men, and then they would take books. So that she can use your beauty to charm men who will then take books. So that we can think like that. So we have a question from Vidarbha. Is success in preaching in terms of big numbers an indication of God's great love? Taking off the prosperity gospel discussion, yes and no. It may be and it may not be. You know, like Prabhupada said, I could have had so many followers if I didn't give the regulative principles. But that was not my purpose. He said something like that. I could have like hundreds of thousands of followers. You know, like some gurus have so many followers. So in that case, it's not an indication of success. It's an indication that they compromised. They watered it down. So therefore, the average person would be attracted. So in that sense, the numbers are not an indication. The numbers also may not be an indication of your Krishna consciousness. It may be an indication of your ability to promote, your ability to organize. So you may be a good promoter, and you may be a good organizer, or you got a video up on YouTube or Facebook, and it went viral, and all of a sudden, you're the man, or you're the woman. But maybe you're not that Krishna conscious in your personal life. Maybe you're not that a great example, but something you said inspired people. So, you know, you have to consider that, you know, if you want to attract people, you can just, you know, go have Harinam and have girls dance in bikinis. You know, you'll attract more people on Harinam, right? So that's not the goal. Just, you know, to do something that attract people and say, look at it, our Harinams are, you know, we get 500 people. Yeah, because all your girls are dressed in bikinis. That's why. So. And then you have the example that if you're doing everything right and you're very pure and people are being attracted to your purity, then the answer to your question would be yes, it is an indication of your Krishna consciousness, but it doesn't necessarily mean it is. And then the last thing I want to say, it doesn't necessarily mean you're not Krishna conscious if you don't get the results, because ultimately it depends on Krishna. You know, if you're a great speaker, if you're funny, if you're charismatic, you can get a lot of followers. It may not necessarily be congruent with how Krishna conscious you are. And you may be very, very, very pure, and maybe people don't appreciate that purity. So that's also there. But Prabhupada did say that the success of the Hare Krishna movement was because of the mercy of Bhaktisiddhanta, because we followed his instruction. So that's the other side of the equation. That if we follow the orders of our Guru, the mercy will come and we will have some degree of success. But I wouldn't say this person has success here, and this means he's more Krishna conscious. Not necessarily. Not always. It could be, and it may not, and it may not be. It just depends. Okay, we have one. What do we think Srila Prabhupada at the moment of death? Very good. Because wherever Prabhupada is, Krishna is there. Can you see my comment? It seems that you don't see all comments and questions. No, I don't see your comment and questions. And now it's time to stop. So it looks like there's a possibility that we lost some of your comments and questions, and that the fan page is not the best thing. So, tentatively speaking, I would say we should go back to the personal page and then we'll stream to the fan page, because there's a way to do that. And it automatically goes there because it looks like we lost some of you. And if we stream to the fan page, then all the people who follow the fan page will be notified. Something like that. And Guru Nishya said that the notifications weren't working on the fan page, at least in the past. So we'll probably go, but we'll let you know tomorrow. We'll put an announcement on my personal page and also the fan page of where we're going to broadcast, and we'll figure that out this morning. Okay, so now it's time to go. Thank you. Hare Krishna to everyone. Have a good day or a good evening, depending where you're watching. I think Krishna Priya, it's your evening, right? You should be your evening now. Okay, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Go Brahmanandi. Hari Hari Bol.